that for me? Can you be that for me? Imagination, it runs wild and free, but it also gets the best of me. I could be in the cloud for days, hit that low, it feels like it's there to stay. Take me so far, far away. Take me so far, far away. I need a relief. Can you be that for me? I need a relief. Can you be that for me? Can you be that for me?
Infatuated, you ain't afraid of taking the leap. We so Adele the way that our souls roll in the deep. A little TLC, it was chilly, you never creeped. I wonder if a wonder is sowing what they just reaped. Me, you know I got you, I had to say the least. I know it's getting heavy, your levy starting to leak. But please, know these words that I utter are not discreet. My heart is open, ready to soak up what you release. Please.
I need a relief. Can you be that for me?
All right. Welcome to Indie Nights. Everybody, welcome back. Thank you guys so much for coming. I am Sha'Leah Nikole, your host, and we have been doing things a little bit differently for the past couple months. So I wanted to focus in on voting because there is so much going on right now, and we want to make sure our communities are encouraged and equipped to get out there and vote. So that's what Indie Nights has been focusing on. We're using our platform to make sure we do our part. So as we get into the show, I didn't want to do it alone. I wanted to bring a special co-host for this segment. So I have my mentor. She's known me since I was a child, and I've just learned so much being under her tutelage and from Amazing Grace Conservatory, none other than Miss Wendy Raquel Robinson.
Oh, thank you. And the child shall lead them. Thank you, Miss Shay.
Thank you for
great.
being
Hey,
here.
Indie Nights, LA. I'm excited to be here. I think it's essential. I think it's necessary. And I think talking about the power of the vote is what's on the table and is what's happening. So thank you for having me.
Yes, I'm glad you're here. I was just thinking how important it is for us to use our platform to inform people, because we can be doing anything. We could be using it for anything, but I feel like it's a critical time.
Woo! I feel like it's life and death.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And it's unprecedented, no pun intended, but using our platform to really speak up is necessary right now.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to do.
We're going to get to it and we're going to have a good time. Yeah.
Yes. Let's bring out our speakers. We have some special guests here today. So let's get to it.
I have to put on my glasses for the reading of the cards and get the intros right, because I can't stand it when I don't have it right. Okay. All right. Coming to the Black Tablecloth Talk.
Yes.
Black Table Talk is Tarik Ross Jr. He's a Los Angeles native raised in a single-parent Belizean American household. He's an educator, speaker, and a life coach. Tarik received his bachelor's degree in communication public relations from the California State Polytechnic, University Pomona, and his master's degree in college counseling and student development from Azusa Pacific University. He's also been afforded the opportunity to work with thousands of in-custody and formerly incarcerated youth and adults, both locally and internationally, with the Prison Education Project, which is the largest prison education program in the U.S. Wow. So this brother is on it. Please, please, please welcome Tarik Ross Jr. But we're going to call you T tonight, right?
Yes, we're going to call him T.
Come on, T.
While T is coming out, I'm going to introduce Funmilola Fagbamila. Fagbamila. Yes, come on, you got to say that right. Funmilola Fagbamila.
Yes.
Okay. She is a Nigerian-American playwright, performance artist, and professor. She currently serves as a professor of Pan-African Studies at California State University, Los Angeles. As one of the original organizers of the Black Lives Matter movement, Funmilola contributed to the organization's inception in 2013 and served as the arts and cultural director for years following. Her current project, entitled The Intersection, Woke Black Folk, is a stage play on the complexities of Black political identity and a story about how humans navigate difference. Welcome, Funmilola and T. Ross.
Yes. Wow, we got some power at the table.
Yes.
Happy to be here. phenomenal power at the table.
Yes.
You two, brilliant as well. Great
Wow.
to be here.
Likewise.
All right. Well, earlier before we even started the conversation, you and I were having a conversation about the prison system and everything that you're doing with that. So please tell us about the Prison Education Project.
Yeah, so the Prison Education Project is based out of the IE, Inland Empire, ran by Dr. Renford Reese. He's a professor over at Cal Poly Pomona, where I attended school. He introduced us into this community of being able to go into several prisons. I think we're in about 26 different facilities. Some juvenile, way more than several, right?
Right.
Going in and teaching a series of courses. We work with college students as volunteers to go in and teach classes that they're learning about on their campuses and bringing it to those who are in custody, from intro to soft skills, career development, financial literacy, healing and forgiveness. They have a Shakespeare class, creative writing course. The list goes on. So we're really just focused in equipping those on the inside with strategies and tools to help them think and identify their own values and being able to utilize that when they're released. We really focus on that warm handoff once they're released as well. Oftentimes organizations go inside, they provide these services, and we find that when our youth are released or when our adults are released, there aren't many resources available to them.
Right.
The resources that are available are often from, organizations that represent the system that incarcerated them in the beginning. So there's this discomfort that they feel when it comes to, hey, I'm from this department calling to support you. There's not really a lot of trust established. So our hope is to be able to go in, kind of become that bridge to the resources that can help them really actualize their success. So we focus on providing those on the inside in custody with support, but also developing our volunteers. Our volunteers are in college, so they're going to be the future lawmakers, the future social workers. So we want to ensure that they have that grassroots feel, that approach, that community to build up that empathy and understanding of those who are incarcerated.
Well, you're doing a lot. I love it. Okay, what is the average age? Is it the juvenile system or is these?
So we work with DJJ, Department of Juvenile Justice.
Okay.
So the youth that we work with typically range between 16 to 24, depending on when they're going to be released. And then when we're in the adult facilities, it's a range. So we have 24-year-olds there, all the way up to 60 plus.
Wow.
And last question, are these all men? Are there men and women?
So we do both. So we have some facilities where it's mixed. We have some juvenile facilities that are all male, all female, and we also have women facilities, all men facilities as well.
Wow. Well, thank you for your work.
Most definitely. Thank you.
That's amazing. I wanted to ask you about, as I was reading your bio and talking a little bit about the Black Lives Matter movement and being a part of its inception. Can you talk a little bit about how that even came to be?
Absolutely. BLM, Black Lives Matter, started 7 years ago here in Los Angeles. And folks, a lot of the time, don't really know the depths of the history of the movement and even the creation of the organization, right? They just know that at some point a few years ago, they started to hear folks loudly declare Black Lives Matter and that they saw this online and that they saw this hashtag. But what folks don't understand is that Black Lives Matter essentially started as Justice for Trayvon Martin Los Angeles here in LA because essentially in July of 2013, after George Zimmerman was acquitted after murdering Trayvon Martin, folks took to the streets to express discontent, to express rage, to express disapproval, because oftentimes what happens is, of course, if you remain silent, then the concept that oftentimes the media can take on is that there's an approval or that there's an acceptance of what has happened.
Complicit,
exactly.
Yeah.
And so folks took to the streets in ways in which they have in the past. Historically, this is protest happens when folks are pushing back against what has happened structurally, institutionally. So folks took to the streets. And Justice for Trayvon Martin Los Angeles was an organization that was created out of Los Angeles-based activists, organizers, thinkers, artists coming together to really sit down and say, what are we going to do with this? What are we going to do with this? Because what we observed was the reaction to George Zimmerman's acquittal online, which was half of the Black folks saying, they were in complete disarray with sadness and despair, right? Because they couldn't even fully emotionally receive what had just taken
remember
place.
exactly where I was.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You remember because you remember the emotion.
moment. Yeah,
Right.
exactly.
Exactly. And then you have the other, I will just say for lack of to make it simpler, the other half of Black folks that are kind of responding in this way of saying, well, this is America. What did y'all expect? You know, we know the system already.
Wow.
What did y'all expect?
Wow.
Right. And so I will, to make it simple for the sake of time, Alicia Garza wrote what I would identify as a love letter to Black folks online on her Facebook. And she kind of outlined, and she basically said at the end of the letter that we cannot normalize this. We can't allow for this to become so normal that our reaction to this type of injustice is, oh, we expected it.
Right.
And we accommodate that. There's a way in which then you begin to emotionally, intellectually accommodate devastation, unjust situations. You understand? And so essentially at the end of the Facebook update, she was saying, we cannot get to a point where this becomes so normal that we allow it to just be culture, that we allow it to just be so, right?
Right.
And she said Black Lives Matter. Patrice Colors, a wonderful friend of mine and sister of mine, commented on that status saying, yeah, that's it. # Black Lives Matter. Opal chimed in.
And it grew.
And it grew.
Into a movement.
And it grew.
Into a movement.
I mean, 7 years ago, it was still, it wasn't mainstream. It wasn't normative. It wasn't accepted to loudly proclaim BLM. Y'all remember that, I mean, the reaction, the visceral reaction a lot of the time that folks that were organizing and coming together for Black life around that time, we were getting called extreme, we were getting called radical, we were getting called disrupting the peace, we were getting called all of the things that you can get called until something like 2020 happens and folks begin to realize that the very thing that they called radical is necessary, is mandatory, is human.
Yeah.
That brings me to the first question. Why is it so important to vote at this time in our country?
We are gathered here today for the answer for that.
Seriously. You know, I was thinking just on my way here and just reflecting on my experience on social media. I feel like there's a lot of conversation around who's voting, who's not voting, register to vote. And I feel as though there's always this energy around either you will or you won't. And I feel like that idea in itself is very divisive, you know, within our community. And I think for myself, at least, even when I think about my political engagement, you know, not always feeling the most informed or, you know, woke, if you will, right? Conscious in the sense of knowing what I should be voting for, who I should be voting for. And it makes me think about the fight from civil rights movement, right? The fight that has been happening for so many decades before me that I'm not always well informed on. You know, the information that I've been given is the information that I've been given in school.
Which is intentional.
Which is extremely intentional.
Not have that information.
Exactly. You know, so as I think about that, it's like, man, well, there's a lot that has gone into it. And when I look back on our leaders and what they fought for, I feel as though it would be very dismissive of their efforts for me not to engage.
Right.
But then I feel like the bigger question is understanding whether or not I feel as though that our voice needs to be heard. You know, I feel as though that there's this idea that voting is either going to be the fix or it's not going to be the fix. And I think it's just one component of a much bigger concern on our end, right? I think about the engagement we do in our own respective lanes, you know, the work, the me in particular working with those who are incarcerated, right? Those who cannot vote, right? Working with our different populations who have been pushed to the side, who don't have access to the education, the information. You know, I think about the art, you know, being able to use those platforms as a way to inform people. You know, I think voting is just another component of that. And I think we often try and make it this bigger slice of the pie as if that's going to be the thing to change things. And I think the conversation around whether we should or should not is very distracting to understanding that we have a bigger purpose when we actually take a macro view of our current condition.
What's interesting to me, and I'm sorry I got stuck because I didn't even know that there were conversations on people saying why they are not voting. So I guess that's a generational thing that we're going through right now, because that would have me a little twisted,
Right.
To even entertain the fact that they're not going to vote. I mean, we have those family members, TT and all of them who won't vote, but I didn't know that there were actual conversations that are going on social media.
Yeah, the conversations go on, just feeling as though that one vote isn't going to make a difference. I've heard even comedy bits about individuals saying, well, I'm not really that informed, so is it really wise for me to go to the polls and vote uninformed?
Right.
And I think that's a valid concern, because if you go and you're just kind of filling in bubbles that you feel like may work, may not work, are you doing a major disservice to your community? So
yes,
I think
you are.
right.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
in that point, do we take that understanding of saying, I can't be misinformed, so let me do the work to go get informed? Oftentimes the conversation ends at, I don't know. I don't have the information, so that's all. So I'm just not going to do it.
That's where the apathy comes in, and nothing happens, right? Wow.
That's right. And that's where the apathy comes in. And I know that we're going to kind of jump into that in conversation later, but the idea that the conclusion could be that, I'm just going to disinvest and dismiss what's happening in this country and in the world because I refuse to do my work in educating myself to know how I can engage in my specific contribution. One of those ways is voting, right? And so there is that kind of most folks, I would say, that I'm engaging are taking voting very seriously because they understand the urgency of the time that we're in. This year made a lot of folks that were very kind of like politically apathetic snap out of it. Because this year was scary for a lot of folks. And oftentimes fear snaps people into a type of action because they feel like all hands need to be on deck. Right. But just like you were saying, there is a kind of contingent of folks that are just like, well, we don't know whether or not it's going to matter. And let me just go ahead and entertain that concept for a second, whether or not it matters. And so when we think of like folks that might dismiss voting because of their understanding of how the Electoral College works and saying, well, maybe our vote doesn't matter if popular vote gets dismissed. And we've seen that happen before. And is the system really going to even allow for our individual votes to be significant? Now, let's entertain that idea and also entertain the idea that there are ballot measures and propositions that are absolutely influential in our everyday lives and the possibility of socioeconomic mobility for some of the most vulnerable people in our population. Like, we can't go down all of the ballot measures right now, and I know that you're going to have an expert come in and break that down in another episode, but like even the work that you do, Tarik, I'm thinking about the people that you deal with and the work that you do to bring down the recidivism rate, right? Because you see that we have systems set in place to make it so that like folks come from vulnerable communities, they get a case while, Timmy across town did the very same thing and didn't catch a case because he was in a community that was not policed. He was in a community where he was not made to be seeming suspicious for no reason, forgive me. But essentially, we're thinking about the fact that we have ballot measures and propositions that are engaging who's going to be able to vote in terms of the felon voting laws, right? And we're talking about folks that have been put in vulnerable situations, served their time, whether it was just or unjust, whether or not these folks are going to be able to engage in our voting system, right? We're talking about resources locally, Measure J, 10% of Los Angeles's budget. Will this money go to, how you can say different services that are not mandatory, that are not needed, or will they go to alternatives to incarceration? Will they go to mental health institutions and facilities?
The things that we need most.
Will they go to recreation centers? Will they go to affordable housing? So when folks say, that the voting in some way, shape, or form couldn't matter, I feel like the only folks that I see saying that are folks that don't want to take on the charge to sit in the trueness of our individual power, and then what that means as a collective. Now, we would be remiss to say that voting is the ultimate power. It is not.
Right.
It is one thing
It
that
is
we
one
do
thing.
to engage.
Exactly. And I think it's intentional. You know what I mean? It starts in the educational system. We are not informed, people of color, of the power of voting. We're not. And that's on
I used to
purpose.
hate history. I thought about that this morning on my jog. I thought about the fact that, like, I used to think history class was so irritating until I went and took a real history class.
Right. Right. I took a Black diaspora class.
Period.
But it changed my life.
Period.
And the fact that you had access to it in college, how many of our community members don't even get that far to even have access to that history to learn, right? To know that there's many facets of history that you can get into to become informed on a deeper level. You know,
especially with the voting and the lives that were lost just to have that right. So
I think that what I see with, like, what is called, like, Gen Z, right, is there's this disillusionment with the system. So it's not even like a political apathy. I want to distinguish, like, a political apathy where it's just kind of like, oh, it ain't got nothing to do with me. It ain't gonna make no difference. It's not my business. To, like, I am politically aware, and I am so aware that I understand that this two-party system is not going to be effective for what my generation is trying to create. So they, like, essentially, in a way, kind of dismiss it or unplug, right? And it's funny because, interestingly enough, it's so random that I don't be watching people's lives like this, but I caught a live by Lizzo. And she basically was saying something very interesting to young people. She is, advocating for folks to vote, but she was saying, I know that this is not our language. I know that this is not how we would like to do things. And I know that, like, the younger generation is thinking about a whole bunch of things in a more expansive way than those two candidates are. And you're having uninspiring options right now.
Right.
But she's saying, just because you're not inspired by your options, it doesn't mean that we then have the option to sit out.
Exactly.
And that's what it is about, not sitting out just because you're not absolutely inspired by the options.
Well, I'm not inspired, but hey, but I'm still going to take action.
Exactly.
Right.
And what is the lesser of two evils?
Right.
Yeah.
I think there's value in being able to see ourselves in the spaces that we engage. Just coming from the world of education, we know that teaching and just students in the classroom have to identify with something that they're learning in order to really grasp the information and for it to mean something. And I think that that's one of the things that's missing. We talk about civil rights movement being so far behind us, but it really wasn't. So if we really were to stop and think about what that looks like and put ourselves in position, I think about myself as a 29-year-old. What was a 29-year-old dealing with back then?
Right.
And literally say, what would that look like? How would I feel?
John Lewis standing up.
Let me go down there and see what that looks like. Even younger. And I would say, I don't know if I understand enough to know that I can be in that position and have that level of strength. Because I don't know that I have a community that has built me up and equipped me with the information, with the confidence, with the history to know what I have within my tool belt.
But things were different then.
They were.
You know what I mean? We were separated. So I feel like when we were segregated, and I know we're probably getting off topic, but we were so empowered as a people. You know what I mean? That we wanted to fight. We had to come together. We had to do these things. So Martin Luther King was assassinated at 38 years old. All of the stuff that he did prior to, I'm blown away. I'm like, I'm not doing enough.
Right.
I'm not. So we're not overthinking it. It's just getting out there, and just how Black Lives Matter, it was a reaction. It was being reactionary and not just sitting back and just watching everything happen.
Yeah.
And while we're here, I want to just bring in Kinaya because she is that generation. So if we can just say a little bit about who Kinaya is, and we want to get her right in here because she's not going to speak for everyone in that generation, but I mean, she can give her perspective. So
I've had the honor of knowing Kinaya Washington since she was 6 or 7 years old, and just to see not only how she has grown into an incredible young lady, but talented, smart, and not afraid to use her voice and her platform as a young lady. And She's got a lot to bring to the table. She's currently a student at Cal State Northridge, and she's here. She's going to be a first-time voter. So I cannot wait to hear from Kinaya Washington. Bring all your opinions to the table.
Yes. Okay, we are back, and I see, we did a little musical chairs.
I had to switch it up a little bit.
Switch it up, but this is Kinaya, and we were just talking so much about, the younger generation, and we want to have a voice of the younger generation, just speak on a little bit about what we've been talking about already.
A first-time voter.
Yes.
First-time voter, I think this is the perfect election for me to have my first time actually having a voice in something. But I think that the point that you made, which was just like an eye-opener for me, was the fact that my generation has this idea of we don't belong here. This isn't our time. This isn't our space. We've evolved into something totally different, and we've transformed, and we've moved into a different space of understanding of life, of self, of community, so when you get into voting, and in such a time like this where you have these candidates who don't give us the best options to pick from, or we don't feel secure in these candidates, it's hard to submit. It's hard to go out and vote and to make that decision, because one thing I'm very clear is that my generation is also very self-entitled. And, we think that we are owed a lot of things. And as far as voting goes and electing these people who will make these laws for us, I think that there's a sense of pride that needs to be taken into it, a sense of responsibility, and a sense of detaching ourselves from what we may think is due to us or what we may think we are owed. Is now, what do we owe our country? What do we owe our family? What do we owe our children? Because at this point, now, whoever we elect into office are going to implement these rules. They're going to set forth actions. There are going to be things that are going to shift and change in our country that we need to be a part of. We need to have a voice in, because you want to know what? We're going to hop on Twitter and we're going to have a problem with it. When it isn't our way, when it isn't in our direction.
Wow.
And I think that that's our downfall as Generation Z and when it comes to voting. And if there's anything I could tell young voters, is to get out and to make that choice and to make that decision and to realize and to step into that power that you know that you have, that we all know that we have. It's time, because if we don't do it now, we're just going to sit around and we're going to wait for someone to make a mistake and then have a problem with it. And there's no space for that.
Well, you better come through, Generation Z. That's what I'm talking about. But you said something that's so profound, and I got into a conversation earlier. It's like in every other corporate world, retirement is 60, 65. So now we have these two candidates that are on the ballot that are, 77, 74. I can see why your generation cannot identify. I can barely identify. But it's that old school, old boys, how things were run so systemically that they are not letting go. So even that needs to change. I feel like this whole system, and this might be the time. Everything has been so unprecedented. Yeah. This might be the time that everything is cracked. Because you just said, let something go. We're going to jump on Twitter and get off. There's a power there that we have never been in a time such as this.
Yeah. That's right.
We've never been in a time such as this.
Right.
So
there is a shift, there is a change, and we are going somewhere that is unfamiliar, that we have to strap our boots up and get ready for it. And with change comes those hard times, but I think it comes those beautiful things, because in the midst of this quarantine and in the midst of everything and just this election in general, there has been a lot of breakthroughs. There have been a lot of people stepping up and speaking out, and I think that that is what's going to make the shift. I think that that's what's going to make the change, and it takes that. It takes for us to recognize our voices and to use them.
Well, I say Kinaya for president. Okay, you got my vote. You know what I mean? The clarity.
Okay, let's see. 2020 something. I'll be here.
That'll be 2030.
No, I'm sitting here, I'm listening to you, and I'm just like, I'm so proud.
I'm so proud.
But it's just like the urgency of not dismissing the voices of young people in this generation. It just cannot happen. There is a history that you mentioned of a type of ageism that exists in this country, in the West, but overall in the world, where there's an assumption that people of a younger generation, that people that would be considered young, don't have the intellectual capacity to think through the systems that govern their lives. And so, yes, we can understand that young people might not have as much life experience, but it doesn't mean that they don't have the capacity to really look at what's happening and make wise decisions about the possibilities of what can be. Because what we find sometimes in older generations, and this is not to be somehow discriminatory, but what we find sometimes in older generations can be a type of, how you can say, an allegiance to what they're familiar with, right? And it's not even just necessarily like a conservatism or a traditionalism, but an allegiance to what they're, the fear of change. And so, just like you mentioned, it's a matter of, even amidst uninspiring options, if you don't feel absolutely represented by the options that we're given, we don't get the option to stop engaging just because we don't see ourselves on the displayed for us. Because what we also understand is that there is one option that could be much more devastating culturally, right? If we talk about what 45 represents culturally and the types of groups that are actually empowered by
45.
the energy, the policy, the words, right? And the allegiance that currently exists as the person who is essentially manning the government and the military of the United States.
And I think that what was most important is knowing the history. And I think, like Ms. Wendy said, it's intentional what we're taught in school. From K through 12, I now go to Cal State Northridge, which was not my first choice. I was supposed to be at a HBCU.
That's okay.
But I digress.
You can always transfer.
I am taking Africana Studies courses in this university, and it's really opened my eyes how so many kids my age are so unaware of just the basic things. Lynching. Unaware of what lynching is, how it happens, what's the definition of a noose. And it's like, it's really unfortunate that they've stripped this away from us. And in our history in general, we're taught that we were just slaves. We were just segregated. We were just oppressed. We have no power in history. We have no voice in history. We have no stance in history. So I do not blame my generation, or nor do I blame other Black people who listen to these things and who fall subject to the things that have been fed to them, because this is our history. This is what we're fed. And now that we're moving into a social media world, it's a lot more difficult to obtain real information, to know what really happened to us. And they are making it obsolete.
They are.
We will not know. We will be unaware of whatever has happened to us. And now moving forward, when you don't know where you've been, there's no way you can know where you're going, and move accordingly so that you do not double back, or that you do not cross over toes that you've already stepped over. You get what I'm saying? So it's the history, and the K through 12 educational system has definitely failed the African American community.
Wow.
Mic
drop.
So we'll see you guys next time.
Exactly. Well, let me ask you this, because you put so much on the table. What do you see, and how do you see things being rectified? Because, there's always a solution. There has to be.
I think the first thing is to completely include history, African American history, and it's
not a watered down history,
not the watered down version. I need to know that the kings and queens began here, and Columbus came and took everything. The Europeans stepped in and stole, divided, and tarnished everything that was already here and made it into their own. That type of history needs to be said out loud. And then when we are given the history, it is now our responsibility, and it's our choice as well to step into that and to move accordingly, to not allow the systematic oppression that is placed upon us day by day to actually take effect of our mental. And a lot of times my dad has taught me to fall in love with my struggle. And in that, it means I know that I'm going through a hard time. I know that things will not be easy. But in the midst of that, it is my responsibility, and it is a part of my dignity and your DNA. My DNA to be who I am regardless of my situation, and to move in integrity and to be transparent all the time, and to move in love, because that lacks a lot in our community.
Yeah. You said something. Go ahead.
You said something so powerful about being able to, essentially what I'm hearing, what your dad was instructing you on, is being able to be whole in yourself amidst all that's happening systemically in the world, and to remain active, but to still remain whole and to remain healthy and to remain well amidst that. And I think a lot of folks don't understand. They think that they have to forfeit their wellness, their peace, their joy, their wholeness to be part of the movement, because that means that they have to be angry and they have to be in shambles at all times. That is not true.
Right.
You can be whole, happy, well, and active, involved, and caring for the community all at the same time. I think that sometimes folks don't see the examples of that, that balance, right? And so absolutely. And one other thing that I'll briefly mention that you mentioned about social media. Social media is something that has informed our lives in the realest way. You said that it can be sometimes a bit tricky, because maybe it can be a distraction mechanism that folks just get so involved in their phones and what everybody else is doing that they're not using their mental power on really educating themselves so they can be most effective in this world. But it also has done something beautiful in offering us a lot of information that folks didn't have access to.
But we have to decipher.
Yes, that's
fact
right.
and fiction.
That's right.
And there's so much information being poured out, so much information at our fingertips, so much that we don't know what's true and what's false.
That's right.
And
like 45 and that fake news.
You specifically wanted to talk about that, and I was going to mention that because you were talking about social media. If you can get into what you were going to say about social media and just,
Yeah, so I really just believe that there's this fight between popularity and credibility. And, I read a study just earlier today, actually, put out by MIT, that the false information travels 70% further than the truth.
My goodness.
So it takes the truth 6 times longer to reach 1,500 people, specifically on Twitter, than it would false information to travel to that same amount of people.
Wow.
So when we really think about that, we have to have some process within ourselves in receiving all of this information, because it's happening
Filters.
in so many, such a high volume, to understand what's true, what's not true, how we're going to take the information. Because it's easy to look at, a tweet with the headline and just hit retweet and keep it moving, and to believe that that's us raising awareness or advocating for ourselves. It's like we have to do a little bit more research. And that little bit more research may just mean clicking the link and reading. That's right.
But that takes work.
But it takes work.
That takes time.
And we have to
and we want to go on to the next one.
Right.
Yeah.
So we keep moving on. And again, I think it definitely is very intentional with how much information is coming in, because it allows for these moments, when whether good or bad, to not have as long as an impact. I think about cancel culture. Someone can be canceled today, and next week, though it's a week later, really feels like maybe months in social media time, because so much information has been pumped in, where we're not really used to taking in so much in such a little bit of time.
Are there any issues or anything that, you guys want to touch on quickly before we have to get out of here, just to, share with those people who are going to vote?
Bring it to the black tablecloth. No, for real. I mean, it's a time to use your voice. And I think there's been some incredible minds here today. I'm inspired. I feel like I'm enlightened. It's so many different perspectives. So
I'm inspired too. All of you all are brilliant, all of you. And we know that our duty and our obligation to each other does not end after the election season is over. I think that that's something that is heavy on my heart, not just on my mind in a particular way, as somebody who the world started to identify me as an activist when I was 18, 19 years old. And I never referred to myself as an activist, right? Because I just thought that wouldn't it be wonderful that if it was normalized that we all just care and that we all just engage in whatever it is that we have to offer, right? Because activism looks like so many different things. It looks like so many different things, right? It looks like the teacher who is finally clearing up that history and telling the truth about Black people. It looks like the person who's showing up for their community locally, who is ensuring that that homeless person has that water on an extremely hot day. It looks like so many different things. And I think that what I mean when I say showing up outside of the election, one thing, folks need to show up and vote and encourage our community members to vote. But after the election is over and all is said and done, we are still accountable to each other each and every day. And like, there's something about this season that makes folks just like, all right, I'm putting on my political armor and I'm going to do my duty. Our duties remain, you know, and we can do our duties with clarity and joy, knowing that folks died for us to show up to clear the path for the next generation. That generation clears the path, meaning get rid of some of the muck.
And the mire.
So that, for the next generation, so that eventually we can come to a state where we have people on the planet who are taking care of each other and the planet, right? Because it's not just us that isn't, like, the planet itself is
hurting.
In a state of urgency. You know, we cannot excuse the seriousness of environmental issues, environmental justice, you know, because it's aligned with racial justice. It's aligned with gender justice. It's aligned with all of the things that are most urgent in this time. They're interconnected. So we continue showing up after we hit the polls. That's one step. The next step is finding your contribution and showing up joyfully to offer that.
Joyfully. Yes. And wearing your mask and washing your hands, because we are in a pandemic.
That's right.
We are. Don't forget that.
That's right.
Yes.
T.
Ooh, did we harmonize? Do it again. 5, 6, 7, 8.
T.
You know, for me, the biggest thing is to take action for myself. You know, I think there's a lot of information, as I've mentioned, and I've done a lot in trying to become better informed. You know, putting myself in position to learn. Being okay with saying, you know what, I'm not too informed on this topic. Who can I speak to? What can I watch? Let me do the research. Let me use the tools before me, my phone, the internet, whoever it is, the spaces, the events that I can attend. You know, I think we're, especially with 2020, the time that we're living in, there's so much available to us now on the internet that we have access to spaces that we probably wouldn't have had to pay for at one point in time. So many conferences are free. So many talks are available. And that's something I'm encouraging my community to do. You know, I think we spend a lot of time, again, in division, just against one another. Who's right, who's wrong. But at the end of the day, we all should be taken care of. And I think when we talk about everyone mattering, everyone's life, you know, being important in some capacity, do we realize that that also means the individuals who we disagree with? So if we can understand that the people who we disagree with should also have access to shelter, you know, opportunities, and all the other things that we say we believe in and need for just our own growth, then we also have to be willing to take those individuals in on this level within our immediate community and say, you know what, we have a difference of opinion, but I still love you. I still want to see you do well. We don't have to agree.
Right.
You handle yourself and your home and all the things you do the way that you do. And now when it comes to a point where it's impeding upon my health, my safety, if it causes harm, then we have to make a decision. But I think if it doesn't come down to that, we have to be a little bit more tolerant of one another and not as intolerant and have this energy that we have to be enemies with everyone who doesn't agree with us or like us. So that's my piece.
I think the common denominator of the conversation, and I think the most important thing, is community. And I believe that it's community, and it's us coming together for our mental health. It's us coming together for our peace of mind. Because I don't believe that there's any way that we can move forward in a movement where we want to invoke change in the world and where we want people to respect us in the world, and we do not have that community within ourselves. I think that something generations before us, and I admire so much, is their sense of community and togetherness. There were people on this who lived down your street, would help you with things that today you couldn't. Most people don't know their neighbor. Let's start there. In our communities, we don't know our neighbor. And it's those aspects of community that helped us move forward in a much more monumental way, in a much more like where people had to respect us, because in numbers, there's a voice that is to be heard. And especially during this election, in numbers, there's a voice to be heard. And there's no way those numbers will come from the sky or from the side that you need them to come from if you do not take that initiative and make that decision that this isn't how I wanted it to be. This isn't the direction that I necessarily want to go. But this is a step forward into the future. This is not the future. This is not our last destination. This is not our last president. We have him for 4 or 8 years. But after that, who comes next? Who will we be able to appoint if we have 45 in office again? What happens after that? I think our future is very important, and our youth, my age, Generation Z, we are very important, and we are very critical to this election and to the forward movement of this country in general.
Yes, absolutely.
Tears. And it's so interesting, you know, I feel like I am the senior at the table because I am, but you mentioned community. Community keeps coming up. And the one thing that I grew up in on my block, you know, there was Miss Curry who, you know, okay, Wendy, get this together. You know, I used to have to go and stay. She was the next door neighbor. And then there were all of the kids that lived across the street, LaShawn, Keisha, Tara. You know, we all played together. We didn't have the devices. We didn't have the distractions. Mm-hmm. And every family knew each other. So there was a built-in community. AGC has become a community. And I think it's one thing that will continue to just, it's going to help us thrive. It's going to help us survive, but we have to come together. And like you said, joyfully. Mm-hmm. There's so much pain and anguish right now. So how do we flip that? You know, I want to give we want to give you something good to go out on, you know, and it is about community. It's about having table discussions like this and bringing great minds together from different perspectives. Because now, I mean, I've always loved you, but I'm like, girl, you need to come over, honey. We need to have a little conversation, have some more coffee or something, you know, but it's like just opening it up because I did not know. I mean, I knew Kinaya always had an opinion, but to see where you are now, it gives me hope. It gives me inspiration. It gives me, wow, it's a sense of a broader community because you're going out there and you were really affected by your classmates that didn't know anything about news, and especially after Jussie Smollett, everybody should have known about news. Okay. But I'm sorry, I digress. But that's why I'm here at the table. But there is a community that is very, very important, and I'm glad to see that. So I'm glad to be a part of this community. I'm sorry.
I mean, I think for Indy Nights, the most important thing was us using our voice. Mm-hmm. And if we can say anything to people who are watching is use your voice. Yes. No matter how small, like there are no small voices. It's how you use your voice that matters. So like Fumi said, there's so many ways that you can inspire change. There's so many different ways. It doesn't have to look the same. So you don't have to necessarily be out there in the street, you know, doing the same thing as the next person who's next to you. You can be doing things behind closed doors. You can be writing things. You can be signing petitions. There's so many things that we can all do. And there's so much information that we need to know for this election. There's so much information. So I encourage everyone, do your work.
Do the work. And
you can't complain about what is going on if you don't take part in seeing the change that you want to see. Mm-hmm. So do your work. There's so much information. I know people are seeing on the news about, you know, early voting because that's what is very popular right now, which is, I think, is very important. But ballot boxes that are popping up that are fake. Ballot so you boxes. Need to research in your communities, where can I take my ballot when I am done with my early voting? Should I mail it in or should I wait and take it to the polling place the day of? Like, you have to do all of that research so that you
have a plan.
Make sure that your voice is heard. Yeah. If we have like 1 second, I just want everyone to say what they're doing right now so people can look out for you, look forward to what you have coming up next. If we can just do like 30 seconds. Okay, so
because everybody like
people like to. So actually, just quick. What are you doing? What can we look forward to? Is there
To look forward to, I am in the process of creating a podcast. So
Awesome.
I am moving forward in the steps of everything that needs to happen in order for me to have a podcast. And it's just general for the forward movement of young African Americans. And there will be more details to you soon.
I
Awesome.
love it. Kinaya, watch
You
it.
guys follow everyone up here on social media.
Oh, yes. Speaking of art, I use my art as part of my activism, right?
Yes.
And so my stage play, The Intersection Woke Black Folk, I'm blessed. We've been able to tour internationally. It's been acclaimed by brilliant thinkers like Angela Davis and, beautiful artists like Erykah Badu, and we've been able to expand. And so at this point, just recently, the other night, we did a special show with USC's Visions
amazing.
and Voices. Thank you. Folks chimed in. It was our first full virtual production. Wow. Very happy about that. But I will say that folks know the Intersection Woke Black Folk, that's what I'm working on. It's expanding, it's growing, and we'll be back on the road again next year. My social media, all the information about that is there. My Instagram, Funmi_Lola, FUNMI_Lola, the Intersection Woke Black Folk. Come see us.
All right.
T.
And for myself, you all can find me on all social media platforms, T. Ross Jr. on Twitter, Tarik Ross Jr. Right now, I'm working on an education program providing social media responsibility and literacy workshops for youth and their parents, as well as life skill development programs. And I also have a podcast by the name of Helping Homies Win, Tools for Lifting a Generation. So you can find all that on my social media platforms as well.
Awesome.
Wow.
There's a voter registration guide. There's a voter guide just for folks to know, BLMLA, if you need a voter guide. It's a powerful voter guide. Black Lives Matter Los Angeles and Black Lives Matter Long Beach came together to create a voter guide for folks that need help thinking through the ballot measures and the propositions. Just a resource for folks that might need
And say,
to know.
where is it one more time?
Yeah, how do we
Go
get it?
on Black Lives Matter Los Angeles Instagram or Twitter. The image will be there. Okay. And so all you have to look up is Black Lives Matter Los Angeles. It'll be the verified page. You will see the voter guide. You'll find it on my page as well.
Wow.
Miss Wendy, what can we look forward to?
Well, it all started when I was a mere child. I was wrapped in swaddling clothes, and I said,
No. Well, of course, you can always find me in my community at Amazing Grace Conservatory. We're doing online classes. We had to pivot our program, but it's been successful. We've been able to touch people out of state. So I believe this whole thing, where there are obstacles, there are opportunities. So it's been a wonderful thing. I just got back from Shreveport, Louisiana. I was filming. So I'm in a movie. It's called A Christmas Surprise. Yes. It'll be on Surprise. Actually, it's really good. It's really funny, and it's coming out this holiday season. So I think we need to laugh. Yeah. So follow me. I am Wendy Raquel, because I am. Period.
Yes.
I also want to share, if anyone is interested, we have actually expanded the Prison Education Project to offer. We have students or volunteers as far as Canada, volunteering within the facilities. So our facilities have transitioned online. So we are on Zoom utilizing, our gifts and talents to give back to those in custody because they're not forgotten about. We still find it extremely important to connect with them. So if you're interested, you can find us prisoneducationproject.org. We will be starting up in the spring of next year. And I believe our orientation will be in January. So go ahead and find that website and sign up.
Awesome. So closing it out, I am Sha'Leah Nikole. I have a lot of things coming forward. I'm so excited. A single I just released, Mahogany, which is a celebration of Black culture, Black beauty, all things Black. So, look into that, get into that. There's a visual that is absolutely stunning and amazing, directed by Nina Gloster Burrell and the DP who is helping us put on this amazing event tonight, Teresa. And I'm just super excited about that. The music is just a powerful message that I have coming. And my nonprofit organization, My Footprints LA, it's almost time for our Thankful to Give. This is going to be the fifth year that we've been doing this. We go into downtown LA, into the homeless communities, and provide food and blankets and socks and toiletries for our homeless brothers and sisters. So we'll be having information on that. So stay connected to Indie Nights. We'll have everyone's information on our page, and continue to follow us, continue to support. And, that's what we're here to do, support each other, and we support you guys. So thank you.
Thank
for being
you.
here,
This
for
is
tuning in. I want to
great.
say thank you to Dana, the Industry Loft, this amazing place that we're at. She has partnered with us and she continues to open her space. So we're so thankful for her. Look the Industry Loft up as well. They are an amazing space. So there's just so much going on. There's so much in the community. So reach out in your community and I'm sure you'll find everything you already have everything that you need. So
Right there at your fingertips.
right,
Let's give it up.
Thank
to
you
Sha'Leah
so much
Nikole.
for inviting us.
Wow, I do have to confess, one of the reasons that I did do the black tablecloth, that's what I'm calling it, okay, that's fine, was this young lady has inspired me since she was 8 years old. I've known her. I secretly call her my little red because she was, my little red in the hood, one of the first plays I wrote at AGC. But to see how she has blossomed in her art, in her craft, in her passion, and in her purpose, it's amazing. And this song, number one, all of her music is available, but this particular song, it just speaks to my soul, it speaks to my heart, and I think it's going to definitely speak to yours. It's called Mahogany, and it's her single. It's available on all streaming devices, so please, the one thing that's going to get us through this is art, and it's time for an artist to come to the stage and bless you tonight, so please join me in welcoming the incredible Sha'Leah Nikole.
Born with the skin just like cinnamon, peanut butter, almond, or high yellow from what master did to your great great auntie and them. Oh, you were made special, no matter how they try to make it seem. You have been chosen, not everybody gets to be mahogany, brown sugar dipped in honey, yeah. Cocoa brown dripping ebony, yeah. So much beauty and complexity, and I love it. I love, oh, mahogany, yeah. Cocoa brown dripping ebony, more heavenly. Clothed in the skin like the strongest cup of coffee, brown like a caramel or toffee, red bone from a master did to your great great auntie and them. Oh, you were made special, no matter how they try to make it seem. You have been chosen, not everybody gets to be. Oh, honey, so much beauty, and I love, oh, mahogany, yeah. Brown dripping ebony, nothing more heavenly.
To me, we are the most beautiful creatures in the whole world, black people. And I mean that in every sense, outside and inside. And to me, we have a culture that is surpassed by no other civilization. We don't know anything about it. My job is to somehow make them curious enough to get more aware of themselves and where they came from and what they are into and what is already there. And I will do it by whatever means necessary.
Mahogany, brown sugar dipped in honey, cocoa brown dripping ebony, so much beauty and complexity, and I love it, I love it. Oh, mahogany, cocoa brown dripping ebony, nothing more heavenly.
thank you guys. That has been Indie Nights. Make sure you follow us on social media and make sure you get out there and vote.
The skin just like cinnamon, peanut butter, almond blend, or high yellow from what Pastor did to your great